The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to everyone. It's an honour for me to rise in the House today once again.
By acknowledging that we are all on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation and express our deep appreciation for their patience as we remain on unceded territory, Meegwetch. We need to actually re-establish in every speech at every opportunity the ongoing demands of reconciliation, and it has to be more than land acknowledgement. Today I stand before you to speak at report stage on Bill C-8, a bill I support and about which I have spoken at previous stages in this place. So report stage gives us an opportunity to look at where we are on the verge of the bill passing and going forth to the other place. Some concerns have arisen, and I want to address those because I would like to know from the government that there is a plan to address issues that surfaced from the hard work and diligence of the Parliamentary Budget Office. But I also want to reflect, as we have this opportunity at report stage, and we're more than 2 years into a pandemic, to perhaps look at some of the elements that are at a higher level of abstraction than the bill before us, but which are related. Nothing will be off topic, but I do want to reflect on where we are now, 2 years into a pandemic. First, let me address what Bill C-8 is, just as a quick refresher. This is a bill in 7 parts that is exclusively in response to COVID-19 at various aspects. Its health impacts, its essential equipment that we need, such as rapid testing, and impacts on different sectors, including schools, and of course businesses and individuals and workers. It is one more of the many, many bills we have seen since we started down this road March 13th of 2020, when this place adjourned because we realized we were in a global pandemic and we could not continue meeting as we had. But we have, since that moment, March 13th, 2020, in this place, generally by unanimous consent, approved tens of billions of dollars of relief, similar to what's in the package today in Bill C-8, which I support. So we have things like rapid tests, ventilation for schools, delays for small business on the required moment, which they have to start repaying loans. It's a package with which I think all of us here in this place are now very familiar. One thing that was a surprise, and I want to dive into it a bit because I think citizens of Canada need to know we're paying attention to the billions of dollars we pass in this place, and that's a certain redundancy which the sharp-eyed people at the Parliamentary Budget Office noticed. And that's in relation to spending for rapid tests, which again I support. But there's $1.7 billion for rapid tests found in Bill C-8. There was $2.5 billion for rapid tests found in Bill C-10. And then there's the $4 billion in supplementary estimates that we have also passed. So the question is, are we paying more than once for rapid tests? And the answer is yes. Well, the money is allocated, at least $4 billion repeatedly, twice, in fact. I see an alarmed parliamentary secretary looking my way. And yes, this is confirmed by Yves Giroux, our parliamentary budget officer, that there is, in fact, more money allotted that is needed. Now, I'll quote the parliamentary budget officer here, speaking in the other place. Quote, when we asked questions about the intended use of the funding, it was to procure rapid tests for COVID-19 and to distribute them to provinces and then to Canadians. When we, that is the Parliamentary Budget Office, asked why try to have it go these two different routes to get to the same end, the government responded that it wants to get the funding as soon as possible. So they're trying this through Bill C-10 and Bill C-8, as well as supplementary estimates C. They will use whichever authorities come first to procure these tests. However, they've already started procuring these tests, so they're doing it at some risk management should the spending not be approved. That seems to be the reason why they are pursuing these two different approaches, close quote. The discussion in the Senate then went on to discuss, would we spend $4 billion twice, or would there be some way of stopping the additional approvals once the tests are purchased? I don't really feel I have an answer in this place to that question. I'm still voting for Bill C-8. I want to make sure we get the rapid tests. I want to make sure we know what we're spending the money on. But I'd also like to register now in this place, especially to government members, we want to make sure there's some mechanism in place to avoid spending $4 billion twice. It appears from the Parliamentary Budget Office questioning of the government that this was not by accident, but I'd like to flag that I've never seen it before. I think it's quite unusual to approve spending of $4 billion twice to make sure you get it once. With that, I want to turn to a key area that I think is, again, at a higher level of abstraction, a problem with our federation. I'm not proposing ways to fix it, but I want to flag it. It's been, in my view, the reason that we failed to meet our climate targets. And I don't mean just recently, I mean over the last 3 decades. It's a reason why I think we have been less than effective as a country, not speaking of a government or a political party, we've been less effective than we could have been in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And my thread on this, I'll say the spoiler alert, I don't think the provinces and the federal government work particularly well together. And they should, and we must. I note that on COVID-19, $8 out of every 10 spent on COVID relief came from the federal government. We passed them in this place. Collectively, we did. But the speed with which we acted, I believe, and this is me speaking personally, I believe is because the federal government might have been ready to act on numerous occasions, but the provinces weren't. And if it was in an area of provincial jurisdiction, we were delayed. I definitely know this is the case on the climate emergency. Ironically, the European Union, of more than 24 independent nation states, separate sovereign nations, have done a better job than our federal government, 10 provinces and 3 territories in one country, of being able to coordinate, negotiate, and come up with a shared solution. Leaving Kyoto in 1997, the European Union went back to home base and within weeks had negotiated a global agreement, global meaning all EU countries, of a bubble, and who'd do more cutting of greenhouse gases, who would do less, so they'd achieve the target they collectively negotiated. They are now collectively about 40% below their 1990 levels of emissions. Canada is about 20% above our 1990 levels of emissions. And I think a lot of this is because federal-provincial tensions and a failure of collaborative leadership. I don't know how else to put it. Now, in the case of the ventilation for schools, which is my thread here, and I know, Mr. Speaker, I have about 2 minutes left, I worked all summer of 2020 on an idea I got for how do we get kids back to school safely. I thought about it and I thought, I've got all these wonderful tourism facilities. I'm very, very committed to the tourism sector, like convention centers and hotels that are vacant because of COVID-19. They'd like to be able to put people to work. We've got schools that will have overcrowding if kids go back to school now. And I thought, why don't we take the empty places because of COVID and allow schools to take place then, and then we'll have a lot more air, a lot more ventilation. It might work. So I started talking to people like the brilliant Paul Nursey, who heads the Victoria area tourism sector. I started talking to people who run convention centers. They said, we'd love that. That could work. Anyway, fast forward to how many people I got involved in groups. Well, People for Education in Toronto, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, the actual Canadian Teachers Federation, the union, they were negotiating, they were talking to other levels of government. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities gave me the time of day, and we started thinking, we could put this together. And the Deputy Prime Minister of this nation and Minister of Finance and her staff were interested in the idea. The one place I couldn't get any pickup at all, I couldn't get anyone to pick up the phone and call me back, was the provincial ministers of education, and no one was going to go anywhere with this idea unless the provincial ministers of education signed on. Now we have here in Bill C-8, one of the things I was trying to address in my, completely ad hoc, volunteer way to try to get something to happen, and we're now approving ventilation for schools. Sure, that's provincial jurisdiction. We should have acted on that a year ago or more, and in my opinion, the reason we're approving it now in the federal parliament as opposed to much sooner We couldn't get the provinces on board. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm interested in your questions. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I can appreciate the efforts and the work that the former leader of the Green Party puts in terms of in her delivery of her speeches. I know it's substantial in terms of content. I want to address the issue of the billions of dollars that were allocated towards the government being able to acquire rapid tests. And I think that's probably the most important aspect, that the acquisition and being able to get the rapid tests in a timely fashion was absolutely critical. And we saw that in the uptake in late December going into January. Now, I don't necessarily know the details possibly as well as the member does, but my understanding is that in regards to this bill, it was to ensure that we had them for the months of going from November to December and maybe a little bit into January. That was my understanding of this specific bill. But would she not agree the most important thing, Mr. Speaker, is that Canada be in a position to acquire the rapid tests for circulation amongst our provinces and territory?
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague for his kind words. I am certain, and I do say I'm certain, and I'm not like other opposition MPs looking for chances to say gotcha. I'm certain this is done with the best of intentions to make sure we have access to rapid tests and are able to acquire them. I just flag that our job in this place is to scrutinize spending and make sure that, and it is Parliament, at least that's the fiction, it's our principle, that Parliament controls the public purse. So I want to flag when I see something a little funny. I'm not suggesting the intentions aren't the best, and I'm not suggesting that the most important thing, I agree with the honourable member, is to have the rapid tests and buy them when we can. But I don't think we need to authorize spending for them twice.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Saanich Gulf Islands for her speech. She talked about Kyoto and the fact that different levels of government had worked together on that. And as Bill C-8 deals a lot with COVID measures in one way or another when it comes to health, would it not be easier to collaborate with the provinces if the government increased health transfers as requested by the provinces? That's one little conflict that could be avoided. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to say to my honourable colleague that I think it's not a great surprise that a member from the Bloc Québécois is highlighting their concerns, their considerable concerns relating to health care transfers for our public system. But I think it's also a question of, if we are here in this House, we have accepted that Quebec is a nation, right? So if it's harder for the nation of Quebec here in Canada to work together with the federal government than with another country like France, where then for the European Union to collaborate on shared issues. I'm disappointed, but this is our reality here in Canada. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Honourable Member for her speech. I just want to come back to that point of jurisdiction and remark that, I think coming out of 2004, Canada had a model for health funding predicated upon health accords, where the federal government played an important funding role, but also a convening role. And you got provinces that weren't told what to do by Ottawa, but they came together with Ottawa to determine common priorities and then a funding structure for that. Now, we got away from that under the Harper government, and this current government, despite having committed to renewing that model, chose not to. That means that we don't have those tables for collaboration around something as important as health funding. I just wonder if you want to speak to that model and the role that engaging in that model on an ongoing basis can play when we face emergencies like the pandemic.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands in 40 seconds.
Quickly then, first of all, my honourable colleague from Elmwood Transcona, I can't remember a single time that he has said something with which I disagreed. And so, once again, we're in violent agreement. We need to restart our health accord process. We need to get people to the table. I'll say on environmental issues, it may be a little different. Engaging with the provinces most successfully in the 1980s We actually won on the battle to stop acid rain with agreements that were negotiated bilaterally, one province at a time till you got a deal. Start with the easy ones and work your way up to the hardest one. We need viable, collaborative federalism. On health, it's that national health accord that's needed. On other issues, it's just get together and make sense.